What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Toilets to Titles Trading Post. What an exciting evening we have planned for you tonight. I am the host tonight. For some reason, they decided I was the adult in the room, and they gave me the keys to the castle. So we're going to try to burn this thing down and all be homeless like Jason. Speaking of homeless Jason, Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? I believe this is your first, maybe second time on the Trading Post.
It'd be my second time on the Trading Post. First in a good long time. I've, as my nickname says, I've been homeless for a good reason. I did some remodeling, not for the unfortunate way that most people find themselves when they're homeless. So, yeah, I'm happy to be back on the show and excited to do this, the NFC East, with you guys tonight.
So I
stole my line.
So. I noticed that Jason is the only one who's using a green screen. That is because currently he's actually broadcasting live from the Love's truck stop. He's actually paid to use their shower room tonight, and they have free Wi-Fi while he's in there. So he didn't want to actually show you that he's in the Love's truck stop because he is still homeless. So
you got to watch out for the lot lizards.
You do. To be afraid of the lot lizards.
Are truck stops as creepy as they used to be?
Worse. There's a couple of good ones, but they're pretty far away from me. Buc-ee's is pretty nice, but the ones in this area not so great.
So that's called Busey's. It's not Buc-ee's. I watched the TikTok. It's Busey's. So also joining us tonight down below me is Joe. Joe, how you doing this evening, my man?
I'm ready to go. My favorite division, consistently disappointing. So, from both a regular NFL perspective and a fantasy perspective, if you really think about it. So
I think this is everybody's favorite division.
What did you ask him to do to you?
Excuse you?
You said down be what now?
Down below me. He's down below.
Oh, okay.
See, he's down there.
He's right down there. Okay, got it.
So, Jason, your humor has been missed.
Well, but you know, remember, I gotta say this now because I just got the eyes from my wife because I tell this joke all the time and she hates it when I do. I say, remember when you used to blow bubbles when you were a kid? And I said, tell him I said hello.
Yeah.
I always said, "Oh, you still got the monkey named Bubbles. That's cool." Anyway, this is supposed to be a PG show. If we don't keep it that way, Steve will have all of us. So let's move past the raunchy humor. We'll save that for another show when Steve's not watching. So tonight we are going to be doing, as we preluded to, the NFC East. We did the AFC East last week. We talked about the Dolphins. We talked about the Jets, who suck. We talked about the Bills. We talked about the Patriots, who suck. So we're going to move right into the NFC East this week, and I believe we're going to be starting with the Cowboys. From the fantasy perspective, I've got to find Mike's little thing. Yeah, I'm not prepared. Like I said, they allowed me to have the keys, and clearly this was a mistake.
So I think offensively, the big thing with the Cowboys, especially tying it back fantasy, was the wide receiver shakeups with, obviously trading Cooper to Cleveland for basically nothing, and then giving Gallup a lot of money. So, and also losing CJ Wilson, which I think is at least worth a mention. So you're down to Lamb, Gallup, and I think James Washington is their number 3 now, according to the depth chart.
Yeah, from a fantasy perspective, like I'm interested in CeeDee Lamb. I'm kind of interested in James Washington just because I don't believe Michael Gallup's going to be starting the year healthy. His ACL tear was at the end of the year. Typically, it takes a lot of time to come back from that. Like it's tearing your ACL at the end of the year. You're not going to be ready typically at the beginning of the next season. So I don't think Michael Gallup's going to be coming back to start the season. I think he's going to probably end up on the PUP list. So that makes me a little bit interested in James Washington. I've become extremely interested in Dr. Schultz, the tight end, and who I believe will end the season as the wide receiver two for that team. And Jason, let me throw this to you. Zeke and Pollard, what do you think about that situation?
Here's the thing I'll say is I'm not a big fan of Zeke going forward, but here's the difference with that right now is Zeke's getting priced to where I want him again. Like all of a sudden Zeke is a 5th round guy and has the upside to be a running back 1. Now, what I'll say about Tony Pollard, I like Tony Pollard as a player, but I think he has a really, really, really limited sample size. So just for reference, Tony Pollard's career carries is 317 over his whole career.
Yep.
Ezekiel Elliott had 322 carries his first season. So, when we're talking about the difference between these guys, it's easy to look halfway decent in a limited sample size when you're coming in to spell a guy and you're rested when everybody else is tired. It's a totally different thing to do it for a full game, for a full season, and to be the guy. And what I'll also say is Zeke even plays hurt and is on the field a lot. So that's just going to limit Tony Pollard upside too. So like I'm buying Zeke where he's at, even though he's dropped off.
So Joe, I want to throw this to you. Tony Pollard and Zeke. Do you feel like in a fantasy you could start them both?
Nah, not week 1. And I really love the point just made about Zeke's value finally dropping, because even last year, like in a redraft, I think he was like 2nd round, which was asinine for his performance. And now I'm getting to the point too, he plays hurt and everything like that, but I'm wondering what the Cowboys are even willing to do with them now. Going back to that rookie season and the 300 plus carries, it feels like the narrative with him all year long was ease him back. It was never it was never watching ESPN Game Day saying, we've talked to the Cowboys all week and they're ready to feed Zeke. They want him to have 25, 30 touches for them to be able to win. You never heard that going into a game last year. So I'm just wondering if the way he's going to be used going forward is just different than it was the first couple of years of his career. To answer your question, no, I would not want to start both of those guys week 1.
So what concerns me and what I think people forget is like the first 4 weeks of the season last year, Zeke was an absolute monster. He was a beast for your fantasy team. He was your RB1 for your fantasy team if you had him, and fantastic. And then he had that PCL injury, and that's where he kind of he never actually had an opportunity to heal. And he just looked like garbage most of the year. But the Cowboys kept giving him every opportunity under the sun in the red zone. And once they got to it was all Zeke Elliott all the time. And that's where I think he's going to make his hay again this year. What about you, Jason?
So touchdown upsides there. And if you do remember talking about injury, there was a brief moment in the middle of last season where they talked about shutting Zeke down for a couple of weeks, giving Tony Pollard the role. And then Tony Pollard had an injury just following that, and they had to go back to Zeke because he could play. I do see a lot of touchdown upside. It is going to be a high-powered offense with Dak, so there will be plenty of opportunities, within the red zone. And I do think that that's Ezekiel Elliott time for the team. So, like, touchdown upside's big. Again, I like him at his 5th round value. I don't like him, where he's gone previously, 1st, 2nd round. But I do, like I said, just watching the trends over the last several months, watching him drop and drop and drop, I think he's now fallen to a spot where I'm back in on him.
So real quick, George, you're absolutely right. And it was actually the first 5 weeks that he was very, very good for them last year. Sorry about that.
The dog agrees with you, man. He's like, hey, dog's like, you're on point. I can't argue.
Dogs are always welcome in the trading post, man.
Right.
Absolutely.
I guess Emma likes
dogs and horses
this year. So you're absolutely right. And I didn't necessarily remember how good he was the first 5 years. So I'm with you there. But I will, to my point, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't know this when I said it. 21 carries was the most he had in a game last year. Yeah. And, that's maybe because of the PC, maybe it was injury, but that's a little concerning to me based on what we thought he was a year or two into his career. Now, granted, you can never run him 300 times a year and have him for 10 years. We know that. Yeah. But 21, when you were having wide receiver issues injury-wise all year and stuff, that's a little shocking to me.
I think he'll finish the year right around 270 touches. I think that's a good sweet spot for Zeke. Let's talk about some other players on this team real quick. We've already spent way too long on the Cowboys. Dalton Schultz is going to be my tight end 5 on the season, is where I have him. Jason, what do you like about Dalton Schultz? What do you don't like about Dalton Schultz?
Let me say this. He reminds me a lot, and this is going to sound bad, but Jason Witten, right? Like a lot of catches, not a lot of like big like breakaway plays. I think for PPR, I think he's great. He had the 3rd most top 12 tight end weeks last week with 9. Kelsey and Andrews like had 10, so he was right there behind them. He was 5th in points per game for tight end in all of 2021. So you like that there, and then you lose, like we talked about earlier, you lose Amari Cooper's targets. Gallup may not start the season. He's up, like he's due for some increase in targets as well.
And Jarwin's gone too.
And right, exactly. Blake Jarwin's gone. So he's my favorite mid-round guy. And what I'm going to say about, like, normally I ignore those mid-round tight ends. I either want one of the really hot ones or I want one of the back end ones, and I ignore the position. But he's going around guys like Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny, Michael Carter, Gabe Davis. Like, he is incredibly stable in the round he's getting taken in 6th round amongst a sea of like guys that have a bunch of question marks, like Gabe Davis they've got new wide receivers in there. Michael Carter's obviously got a running back in front of him now. Rashad Penny's got a running back who just got drafted. Like, so if you start your draft with a bunch of guys that are high upside, but could potentially bust, like, in the 6th round, you could do worse than getting a guy like Dalton Schultz, who's going to be week in and week out, like a decent option for you at tight end.
So last year, Schultz had 78 receptions, 808 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That to me just screams safe. So it sounds like he's a guy that's going to go out there week in, week out. You could put him in your tight end spot. He may not win you the week from your tight end position, but he's not going to lose you the week either. What says you, Joe?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, he also kind of became Dak's security blanket and probably his favorite red zone target by the end of the year, right? Especially if you include the fact that Cooper's not even there anymore. So, no, I'm on board with Schultz, absolutely. And I think he's going to be, I think he'll be a good DFS stream too from a PPR perspective. One thing real quick, that George, you mentioned James Washington, and to me, that absolutely screams DFS gold the first couple weeks. He's going to be cheap on FanDuel. He'll be under 5,000 on DraftKings for sure, under 6 on FanDuel for sure. And he's going to get, even if Gallup plays, he's the number 3. I think he's going to be a great DFS play early in the season.
So we're going to move from the Cowboys. We didn't really talk a whole lot about Dak Prescott, but I mean, what is there really to say? He's going to be a top 10 quarterback. He's a very safe quarterback, so we don't really need to spend a whole lot of time talking about him. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the team who I believe will actually win the NFC East. I don't believe the Cowboys will repeat. I think Philadelphia actually takes home the NFC East this year, and if that division continues the way it has historically, the Cowboys will not repeat because nobody ever repeats back-to-back season as the NFC champs. This team had a pretty dang good draft, but we're going to focus mostly here on the offensive side of the ball. We're not going to get into their defense that much, but I like what they did in their draft. They went out, they traded for the big name at wide receiver, A.J. Brown, pairing him with Devonta Smith. You got the field stretcher in Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor, who is another early round wide receiver that they spent draft capital on. Joe, I'm going to throw this to you. Talk a little bit about this wide receiver core. What do you like? What do you don't you like? What do you expect? I was just trying to think. Is it Terrell Owens the last time the Eagles had the best wide receiver in the NFC East, and they probably do now again with the A.J. Brown deal? You're getting ahead of us. We can argue about that after. Okay, fair. So I was just kind of thinking because the Eagles have been weird the last couple of years fantasy wise. Other than Jalen Hurts, there hasn't been a lot there. Yep.
especially from a league perspective. Maybe you hit a little gold DFS wise, backup running backs or whatnot. But this year, I think they're going to be a little different. I think you're going to be able to depend on Hurts a little bit. I think if Miles Sanders can stay healthy, he had some big games last year. I think they're more relevant this year than they've been the last few years, fantasy wise, at pretty much all positions. They're playing, whether it's Goddard or wideouts or if it's a healthy Miles Sanders, all those guys, I think, and Devonta Smith would all be in a starting lineup week 1 probably.
I want to give a shout out to Joe, who's just been killing it with his comments. This one, he agreed with me that Philly does win this division. This team last year, Jason, they were really heavy on the run. They actually led the NFL in rushing and rushing attempts. You've got your running backs, Miles Sanders, you got Kenneth Gainwell, you got Boston Scott, but you also got Jalen Hurts, who's been known to pull the ball down and run with it. What are you expecting from the running back trio here between Sanders, Gainwell, and Scott? And do you see Jalen Hurts actually as a downgrade from Ryan Tannehill for A.J. Brown?
Maybe, but maybe Ryan Tannehill was only Ryan Tannehill because he had a guy like A.J. Brown. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I see this being good for Hurts. So we'll start with Hurts because, just like most NFL, it starts with the quarterback.
Yep.
For fantasy last year, Jalen Hurts was quarterback 9. His best receiver was Devonta Smith, and he was wide receiver 30. So adding a guy like A.J. Brown's only going to make this way better for Jalen Hurts. And like you said, he can pull the ball down and run. The thing I really love about this is they have the 6th easiest schedule overall for quarterbacks. And they start the season with Detroit, Minnesota, Washington, and Jacksonville. That is amazing.
I love it.
I love it for.
Listen, I'm worried about that Detroit game. I'm worried about the Detroit game.
Right.
Protect your kneecaps.
So speaking specifically about the running backs, like Miles Sanders is not a thing really. He's gone from running back 14 to 24 to 44 over the last 3 seasons, right? Yep. He's gone down and down and down, but. The thing about it is they didn't bring anybody in this offseason to say that Miles Sanders isn't their guy. They've got Kenneth Gainwell, who we all fell in love with for a short period last year, and they just continued to ignore him. And Boston Scott, we've already seen he can't get it done. So what I'll say about Miles Sanders, even though I'm off Miles Sanders right now, he's getting drafted right in front of guys like James Robinson, Devonta Foreman, Latavius Murray, Jamal Williams. He's getting drafted around those guys, and around those guys, I do want him, right? But on the downside, and I'm jumping back and forth, I apologize. He had no touchdowns last year. He was 38th in red zone touches. He had less touchdown or red zone touches than Latavius Murray. Those guys, man. I'm so in and out of him because where he's falling in drafts, he should go there.
His yard per rush, real quick. The last 8 games of the season, he had a yard per rush of 5 every single game or better.
Yeah,
but to your point, he gets nothing in the red zone.
I mean, no touchdown upside, right? Because he got no touchdowns, literally no touchdowns, and that goes back to Jalen Hurts pulling it down.
Yeah, I don't think he'll go another season with 0 touchdowns. I think that was an anomaly. The thing that really concerns me with Miles Sanders is his inability to play 16-game season. And I'm not going to go out and throw out that injury-prone label. I'm not. He started 11 games his rookie season. He only played in 12 games in 2020. He only played 12 games last year. So those numbers clearly hurt his numbers overall. But that's something to be concerned about. Is the inability to stay healthy. The one thing also I want to touch a little bit on A.J. Brown is if you think it's a downgrade for A.J. Brown to go from Tannehill to Jalen Hurts, you're not paying attention because A.J. Brown doesn't need a lot of volume because he's super efficient. If you look at what they were doing in Tennessee, their first, second, and third option on offense was Derrick Henry. So they wanted to run the ball. That was the entire offense was based upon them running the ball. Same thing is going to be going on in Philadelphia. The only difference is across from A.J. Brown, he's got Devonta Smith who can help open things up, and Devonta Smith can get down the field. He's an electric athlete. He's an electric wide receiver. So AJ Brown's finally got a weapon across from him that he's never actually had. Like Corey Davis was okay for a year or so, but he wasn't. I don't think Corey Davis is better than Devonta Smith. And then Julio came in last year and was supposed to help take some of that pressure off AJ Brown, and that didn't work out either because Julio was injured the whole time. So I think having a nice young core here, I really like what the Eagles have done. I think Jalen Hurts has the potential to finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I'm not going to go out and say that he's a top 5 NFL quarterback, but I also think the Eagles have done everything they could under the sun to finally see if Jalen Hurts is the answer for them at quarterback or not. Jason, I'm going to throw it over to you real quick. I want you to talk a little bit about Dallas Goedert, and then I'll throw it to Joe with Joe's opinion on Goddard, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next team.
So I don't have any real fancy stats on Goddard. What I can say is that, when Ertz left, he was supposed to be the guy. And I'm going to quote one of the best modern day football movies and say, he looks like Tarzan, plays like James. Like he has all the physical attributes you want from a tight end. He has the draft stock. He has everything you like. He's going to be drafted high again. But time after time, when he's the sole tight end, either the team doesn't throw it to him or he doesn't get open. He doesn't catch the ball. I like the guy. I don't think he's going to be. I would take a lot of these. I would take Dalton Schultz over him.
You're getting ahead of the show, Jason. We don't talk about taking this person over this person from the same division yet.
Look, I've been homeless. I didn't get to see the other shows. I'm sorry. I don't know the format.
Joe, what says you?
To Jason's point earlier about the Zeke Elliott and the value thing, it's the opposite with Goddard last year, right? He got too valuable. It was too expensive. Whether you were talking a DFS salary or whether you were talking about he got too expensive because of the upside. Ertz went. He had shown flashes. I think he's solid this year. But I agree on. I don't want to break the rules, but I also do agree on Schultz. The last thing I'll add with the Eagles is Jalen Hurts had 10 rushing touchdowns last year. So when you talk about the Miles Sanders and the no rushing touchdowns, your quarterback stealing 10 of those right off the bat, that's tough.
Yeah. Joe's chiming in that we forgive you, Jason, for not paying attention to the show last week.
Well, it's always better to ask forgiveness than permission, so we're good.
Correct, 100%. All right, so the next we're going to go to the newly named Washington Commanders, or as Mike has them, the Washington Commies. The quarterback is Carson Wentz, who they traded for. Running backs, you got Gibson, McKissick, and Robinson. McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Johan Dotson, De'Ami Brown at wide receiver, Logan Thomas at tight end. Joe, the biggest name here that they traded for, because they feel they're only a quarterback away, was Carson Wentz, coming over from the Colts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's good for McLaurin probably long term. So I don't care what Wentz does as far as winning or losing, right? And he's probably not going to win them any big playoff games that they weren't previously already winning anyway. I think fantasy-wise, he has an opportunity to be middle of the road, but this doesn't excite me fantasy-wise that Wentz landed there. This whole team's success offensively, in my opinion, is all about how effective Antonio Gibson can be. And I think the passing game grows off of that. So no, for me, Wentz is a backup fantasy quarterback in a redraft league this year.
Jason, how do you feel about Carson Wentz?
I try not to. You know that Spider-Man meme where all these guys are pointing at each other, and I wonder if they got Carson Wentz, and then Baker Mayfield became available, and Jimmy Garoppolo was over there, and they got one of those memes where all three of the quarterbacks were pointing at each other, and it's just all the same, and that was the only guy that was available. It's just.
If I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they make a play for Russell Wilson? I feel like it's been a while ago, but I feel like they made a play to try to get Russell Wilson.
Not sure. I don't remember that, but it's possible.
I could listen. I very well could be wrong, right?
I mean, I'm pretty sure any quarterback needy team tried to get Russell Wilson when they found out he was available. They just didn't get to him.
Yes.
So.
Actually, real quick, And it's rumored on March 4th that, per Ian Rappaport, that Washington offered multiple first-round picks for Wilson, and Seattle rejected the offer.
That's probably because they didn't want him to stay in the NFC. That makes sense.
I mean, they really just wanted Noah Fant. That's what it was.
So Joe's coming in with somewhat of a hot take, and I was going to point this out in a little bit. Don't be shocked if Washington wins the division. Like, it's a solid team. Their defense is absolutely loaded. They do have weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Everything is going to really hinge on the arm of Carson Wentz, which is not a good position to be in. Their running back situation is kind of a mess. You got Gibson, McKissick, and the rookie they drafted in, Brian Robinson Jr. Joe, what do you think about that trio, the three-headed running backs that they got there?
Well, yeah, and I want to ask the question to you guys because I was pretty high on Antonio Gibson going into last season with the flashes and how he played in 2020, and then that was just ugly for him last year. Well, I don't know what to make of that because Gibson was tracking to be like a top 10 running back going into last season, especially with the way they played and everything. So I don't know. That's a head scratcher to me. I'd like to think he bounces back this year. I guess Wentz maybe makes them a little more balanced than maybe they were perceived to be last year. Maybe that helps. But it's a really interesting. And then McKissick's even interesting too because he signed with another team and then pulled like a Josh McDaniels, right? And then went back. So
he said out he was going to go play for the Bills, and then said, "Psych, I'm going to go back to Washington."
I loved what that tandem did in 2020 from a fantasy perspective because you could almost play both of those guys in the same week in 2020 with the way Gibson was scoring and McKissick was catching if you were in a PPR. I don't know what to think of them going into this year. I'm going to, you're going to have opportunities to draft Antonio Gibson, and I'll probably take the plunge in a couple situations and then even it out and not take it in others because that's the best I got.
So, Jason, they spent a third-round pick number 98 overall on Robinson. They've got Gibson. They got McKissick. Is there anything here that intrigues you about this running back group?
I mean, avoiding it, knowing I can avoid it now because they've got Robinson. They've got, you hear rumors of Damian Williams, or is it Williams and Stewart from yesteryear with Ron Rivera. They're talking about like running that back. Jonathan Stewart, exactly. And so I don't want a two-headed monster from a team that I don't think is all that great. I know we're potentially talking, like Joe's talking about the Redskins or the Commanders actually potentially like winning that division, but I don't see it. Not with Wentz. If you want to ask anybody if Wentz can carry you to the playoffs, all you had to do was beat the Jaguars in week 18 and they got decimated by the worst team in fantasy football or regular football. And Carson Wentz looked atrocious. I don't think he's got it left in him. So I don't see them winning. And we've had this infatuation with McLaren for a couple of years. And something interesting that I when doing this research, his games with double-digit fantasy points over the last 3 years have gone down each and every year. He had 6 in 2019, 5 in 2020, and only 4 last year. He's got boom games, which make you think he could be okay. But, maybe that talent really isn't what we want it to be. And it's not just the quarterback. It's that the quarterback plus he just disappears.
The one thing I like McLaurin. Like, I know, Jason, I know you were a lot higher on Terry McLaurin than I was when he first came into the league, especially his rookie season. Yep. But you almost got to feel bad for the guy because he's gone from like Ryan Fitzpatrick to Cam Newton to Taylor Heineke to Carson Wentz. Like, it's a who's who of hot dog poop for quarterbacks throwing him the ball. And then they brought in Curtis Samuel last year, who's supposed to be, their Swiss Army knife, supposed to do it all. Supposed to be able to play wide receiver, supposed to be able to do running back. I'm not going to equate him to the guy out in San Francisco that everybody loves to pull a comp for and say that this is their – no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. There's only one of those. He's out in San Francisco. So I feel bad for the guy. I think he's super talented. I just think he's had a real bad luck on quarterbacks getting him the ball. And I do want to point out before I throw it to you, Joe, that at 28 minutes and 30 seconds, Jason basically guaranteed he's only going to have 3 double-digit fantasy games this year.
We're
Joe, the
counting him
floor is
down.
yours.
Yeah, this NFC East, my God, I'll tell you, it is something. I don't know. McLaurin for me, fantasy wise, it's like I'll try to hit him the right couple weeks DFS wise, coming off a down week, so the salary gain is there. But I don't want him as my number 1 fantasy league wide out, and I don't think you're going to be able to get him as your 3. So he doesn't feel overly draftable to me. Curtis Samuel, I loved Curtis Samuel real quick in what was his last year in Carolina, 2020, 2019. I loved him, and I thought that was a great signing for the Redskins, and he couldn't stay on the field last year. I'd love to see him come back and make a difference this year, but it's too much of an X factor. I'm not going to sit here and say he's definitely going to do so.
So Joe's chiming in with a hot take, says Dotson will be Washington's wide receiver 1 this year. While I agree that could possibly happen, I'm going to say no. And I think this is just hey, look, it's a shiny new toy. Right now we're all still in the middle of dynasty season. That's where our brains are geared towards, even though we're trying to do this more as a redraft show. But I just think everybody's got these shiny new toys right now who we have to remember, they're not all going to pan out, and some of them are actually going to take time. And I think Dotson, while I agree he's got the talent to be their number 1, I don't think he's going to be their number 1 this year. I still think it'll be McLaurin. I think, Dotson will go out and get you 600 or 700 yards this season, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns, but I don't think he's going to lead this team in yards, receptions, or touchdowns. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think we get spoiled with guys like Justin Jefferson and Chase. That we think every rookie, every shiny new toy is going to come out and be a wide receiver 1, and he has the talent to do it. But like you said, it might not come right away.
This is correct. Lastly, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on him. It's a tight end that I actually like, but he just hasn't really been able to put it all together. Logan Thomas. I don't know if you guys knew this or not. He was a former basketball player. So that automatically means he's a good tight end. He's really the only tight end to name. He's coming off an injury. He got injured last year. Hopefully he can bounce back. He's not somebody I'm going to trust start. I could think of at least 15 other tight ends right now I would want to start over him. So do you guys have any, convictions on Logan Thomas here?
So I in prep for this, I was reading about, he's ahead of schedule. I think everybody who's got an injury is ahead of schedule at this point. Yep. But, just a month ago, there were talks about him starting on the PUP list. So the range of outcomes for where he starts. Now, I do think if you're one of the guys that punts tight end, paying attention to the PUP list and seeing him come back healthy mid-season, it's a guy you can pick up late because he's got talent, and if he doesn't become anything, you just drop the last guy off your bench to get him, and he doesn't really hurt you any to grab him. So I think he's potentially one of those guys, but to start the season, I doubt he'll be healthy. Yeah,
he's somebody, if you're looking at the back end of the draft and you want a dart throw, I don't mind taking one on Logan Thomas if you just punt the position, but he's not somebody I'm going to feel comfortable, spending any serious draft capital on. Let me go here. Lastly, but not least, everybody's favorite team in the NFC.
It might be least.
I think it's least.
I think it's least. And I'm a diehard Giant fan, but it's hard to argue it's not least.
I was saving this one by our boy Nate. Maybe the team just stinks. And he posted this while we were talking about the Commanders, but I know he was foreshadowing for the Giants. So we're gonna do a quick little deep dive here on the Giants. They got Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes at quarterback, Saquon, Matt Breida at running back, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson at wide receiver, Ricky Seals-Jones, and Jordan Akins at tight end. Joe, you publicly admitted that you like this team and you cheer for them. So I'm going to start it off with you. Can you sell me on Danny Dimes as a one quarterback league quarterback, or even possibly even a super flex quarterback that I should be interested in drafting?
You know what? And I'm pretty pessimistic with these guys, but I'll bite on the super flex because I'll try to call it up now. But what we found out last year is he can actually score some fantasy points with his legs
if he doesn't trip in the open field.
Well, true, but you know, he had 298 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. You couple that with the passing, which can't possibly be as stagnant as last year with the new regime, I'm hoping. You know what? If he was your super flex second QB, I wouldn't hate that. But certainly I'm not ready to make any.
They brought in a new coach and a new GM this year, right? From Buffalo Bills, Brian Daboll, and I forget who the GM was for the Bills, but no, like I like what the Giants did in the draft. They drafted many who consider probably the number 1 tackle in the draft. And then they got who some people can make an argument for like the number 1 or possibly number 2 defensive tackle in the draft. Yep. So they addressed their trenches, which I'm a trench guy. I like build your offensive line, build your defensive line. Everything else will fall into place. So improving on the offensive line should help Daniel Jones. Jason, what do you think?
Well, so we're talking about 200 and some odd yards for Daniel Jones on the ground. How many quarterback sneaks on 3rd and long is that?
That's a good question. That is a good question.
I don't know. I'm looking over this roster, and it feels like Kenny Galladay's washed. Kadarius Toney looked good when he was on the field, so hopefully he can stay healthy. But like they went and drafted Wan'Dale Robinson, and doesn't he do a lot of the same things?
Well, he does in the doghouse.
Yeah, he does the exact same thing as Kadarius Toney. Like, so that's the Spider-Man meme with them pointing at each other.
Yeah, that's and so Toney looked good in spots, but you don't want him because, like you said, he's in the doghouse, so you don't know what he's going to do with this new coaching regime. They don't have any ties to Kadarius Toney. They don't need to like make him look good because they weren't here when he was drafted. So, Saquon Barkley looks good in OTAs. You got to hope he stays healthy. But from what everybody's saying, he looks explosive. You know, his average draft position has dropped to a point where I'd be back in on Saquon again. Because, I don't have to take him in the first round. So I'd take a shot on a guy, even if he's injury prone, which you have to say at this point. And I know we don't like to predict injuries, but the guy's been injured. And I saw a stat today that I thought was pretty depressing from a Giant standpoint, where Sony Michel has had more rushing yards with 31-37 in his career than his fellow first round pick Saquon Barkley with 29-37. And if that doesn't tell you everything, because none of us think Sony Michel
and he hasn't even started. He
right?
hasn't even started.
He's not a starter, and so that just gets to the point that like Saquon's not on the field, and with him not on the field, it's tough. But like and then maybe, and just like Nate says, maybe the team just stinks. And
may I ask you guys a quick question? As me being a Giants fan, just trying to solicit, and George, I feel like you have pretty passionate takes on individual players, so maybe it's you, Kenny Galladay. What the hell was that last year? And is there any reason to think there's a bounce back in him?
So I think there is a bounce back in Kenny Galladay. I don't think it's going to be a bounce back that is going to have him to be what he was in Detroit with Matthew Stafford, because I think you're talking about 2 totally different quarterbacks and style of play between the quarterbacks, between Daniel Jones and Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford's got a better arm. He's a lot more accurate. I think he's a smarter quarterback than Daniel Jones. He can get the ball out quicker. He can read the defenses a little bit better. So you're comparing apples to oranges with the quarterbacks. But with that said, like they made Kenny Galladay the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. To this day, number 1, Kenny Galladay. Number 2, I'm going to say Christian Kirk. I'm probably wrong, but damn it, I feel like it's close. So they spent a ton of money to bring in Kenny Galladay.
4 for 84, right?
I'm sorry?
4 for 84, I believe, correct?
Yep. So they spent a boat to get Kenny Galladay. I feel like because of the amount of money they spent to bring him in, like they're gonna use him. They're gonna have to. I think he is the best wide receiver on this team. Jason mentioned it earlier about injuries. And I mean, this team really is like that could be said for almost every position on the team outside of tight end and quarterback. Like Saquon, you're worried about injuries.
Wise,
Matt Breida, I mean, it's Matt Breida. He got cut from the Dolphins. What more do I need to say? Kenny Golladay, he got injured last year.
Shepard,
Tony is in the doghouse. Shepard can't stay on the field. Slayton can't stay on the field.
Ricky Seals-Jones can't stay on the field.
Ricky Seals can't stay on the Jones. Jordan Akins, he can stay on the field. He's just never been given the opportunity to stay on the field. So I want to bring this up. I agree. I don't think he's top 10 anymore. I was referring to when they signed him, they made him the number 1 paid wide receiver in the league. Clearly, that's going to change because other contracts have been signed. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, et cetera, et cetera.
He's the Kirk Cousins of wide receivers.
He is. He absolutely is. So there's like, as far as fantasy goes, the only players on this team that interest me at all is Saquon Barkley and Kenny Golladay. And like Jason said, you can get Kenny Golladay, or not Kenny Golladay, I'm sorry. You can get Saquon Barkley at the back end of the first round, maybe at the beginning of the second round. I feel like that's appropriate. And you could be getting a guy who, if I told you at the end of the season, Saquon Barkley finished as a top 3 running back, would anybody here be surprised? Because I would not.
I wouldn't be surprised because of Saquon. I would be surprised that the offensive line made that much strides since last year.
How about you, Jason?
So I could see it because, again, talent does win out if he can stay healthy. Now, Saquon Barkley's ADP right now is 28 on Fantasy Pros. So, like, you're getting him. Yeah, you're getting him.
Third.
That's third round.
Third round. So that's where I'm taking him.
Well, so I bet you that's also skewed. You're not getting Saquon Barkley in the third round in a redraft league. I think right now Fantasy Pros is Dynasty, and that's why it's going into the third round.
Yeah, probably.
So I think you're looking at a second round pick in Saquon. I'll bump him up 1 whole round, 12 whole picks. So if you're what pick was he going, Jason?
It says he's going pick 28.
28, so we'll take off 12, so 16. So, you're talking beginning of the second to middle of the second round for Barkley. I love that.
I like that too, but the issue I have there real quick, and then it's the Giants. There's nothing else. But the issue I have with that is I don't mind the round of taking him there, but I don't want him as my number 1 going into the season. And I don't think, I mean, I guess you take a running back first round, you take Barkley second round, but that's where the rub is there for me. I don't mind that cost, but I'm not going to feel great about it if he's my number 1 week 1.
Yeah, and I agree here. I agree here with Joe. His rookie year was behind a bad offensive line. If healthy, you expect
horrible offensive line his rookie year.
Yeah, well, so where he makes his money is in PPR leagues. That's where you're getting the money from Saquon.
Well, so that's what I was going to say, though. Also, a very different quarterback his rookie year, right? It was Eli wasn't it Eli Manning?
It was.
A lot of it was a ton of checkdowns, screens for, and he'd break it 80 yards in open field, and Daniel Jones just doesn't do that. Maybe it's because he runs a little bit. Maybe it's just because he's looking downfield. Maybe it's because he's running for his life and getting sacked. But Eli was really good at checking down a Saquon, and that's where he got a lot of his points. It wasn't that he was like some fantasy rushing fantasy monster. It was just like, it was a lot like Todd Gurley when in Todd Gurley's heyday. It was, some running. Todd Gurley was a better runner from what I've saw, but a lot of those screen passes that you think should get stuff behind the line go for 80 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We're pushing 45 minutes here. We spent probably about 30 minutes more than we should have going over the NFC East. But before we go, Jason, I know this is new to you, but it's something that we kind of winged last week, and it was actually a good time was had by all. So we're going to do it again. Out of just the NFC East, of the quarterbacks, what is the best quarterback?
For fantasy or like football?
For fantasy. Yeah, we're a fantasy show, so we're going fantasy.
I'm going to say Jalen Hurts.
Joe, you agree?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I mean, Dak's the best quarterback overall, but fantasy-wise, I like Jalen this year.
Yep, I also agree. I'll go with Jalen there. Jason, I don't know if you remember when we were talking about rookies and Jalen Hurts when he got drafted and how high I was on him. I said I told you it would take a couple of years for him to get in there, but once he got that starting job when Wentz got hurt, he probably wasn't going to let it go, that he'd be a locker room leader, and that's exactly what's happened with him. I've been a huge fan of Hurts since his days back in Alabama. So, all right, next one. This one's going to be a little bit more interesting. Joe, I'll throw it to you first. Best running back in the NFC East.
That is interesting because you've got a lot of different situations with all four of them, but I think I'm going oh, God.
It's awful.
It should. Well, I guess it should be Zeke Elliott, but I feel like it should be Antonio Gibson fantasy-wise based on the way those four teams are built, but I'm going to go Saquon Barkley. I am going to go Saquon Barkley is the most talented running back in that division, and I'm going to go Saquon.
I love the conviction. Jason?
Yeah. I'm all in. So of the four, I'm going of the four teams, I'm going Saquon as well. And it's not so much because of Saquon over Zeke. It's that Zeke has Pollard and Saquon has Matt Breida. Look, so I think it's Saquon.
Yeah, I agree. I love the fact that, well, I don't know if I love the fact that we all agree on these or not. I wish there was a little bit of difference, but it's hard to be different when you're talking about this particular set of positions between the quarterbacks and the running backs. Saquon, I also believe, is the best running back right now for fantasy out of the NFC East. Now it gets fun. Jason, I'm going to throw it to you first. Best wide receiver in the NFC East.
Oh, man, this one's the tough one, right? Because it depends on if you buy the real upside of CeeDee Lamb. And I do. I buy CeeDee Lamb's upside here. I'm going to say it's CeeDee Lamb. You got Gallup hurt. James Washington's okay. Cooper is gone. So he's not really fighting anybody but Schultz for targets. So I'm going to say CeeDee Lamb is going to be the number one wide receiver in the East, knowing that A.J. Brown is an amazing wide receiver.
Joe, what says you?
I'm going to go A.J. Brown, and I'm over CeeDee Lamb because of the number twos there. I think Devonta Smith is going to help out A.J. Brown more than Michael Gallup or, James Washington, to your point, because Gallup can't even stay healthy, is going to help out CeeDee Lamb. Lamb's going to get the number one corner of every team all year long, whereas I think it's going to be a little tougher to take care of everybody, all of the pass catchers in that Philadelphia offense, especially if Jalen Hurts is starting to click and running all over the place too. So I'll go A.J. Brown.
So I'm going to go CeeDee Lamb just because, based upon last year, the Eagles were a run-first offense, and I kind of expect them to do that again. So I think A.J. Brown's a great wide receiver. I think he will be great for fantasy. But I think with other wide receivers on that team like Devonta Smith, you've still got Dallas Goedert. You got Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, who will do some catching the ball out of the backfield. There's a lot to go around there where I really only see it's just two receiving threats for the Cowboys for me, and that's CeeDee Lamb and that's Dalton Schultz. So I'm going to go with Lamb as the wide receiver that I want for the NFC East. And then I think I know where everybody's going to go for tight end. But, Joe, I'm going to throw it to you first. Best tight end in the NFC East, and why is it Sean McKinnon?
Yeah, I think Homeless Jason probably sold me on this one with his argument earlier, because it would have been a tough decision for me going into this, but I think I'll go Schultz. No Jarwin. I think he really will be their number two pass catcher for the season when it's all said and done. So yeah, I'll go Schultz. I'll give, we haven't given a lot of attention to Dak. So I'm going to, just kind of say, okay, it is still Dak. He's going to get his yards. He's going to get his touchdowns, and Schultz is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree. Jason, what says you?
I mean, listen, I already told you how I feel about Goddard. It would be funny if I said Goddard now, because it's Jane being the number one tight end. No, it's for sure Schultz.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's Schultz as well. So you heard it here first, folks. Best quarterback from this division, Jalen Hurts. Best running back is Saquon. Best tight end is Dalton Schultz. Best wide receiver is Michael Gallup, or excuse me, I'm sorry, CeeDee Lamb. I'm looking at Michael Gallup, but what I want to say CeeDee Lamb. Jason, Joe, I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. It's pushing 50 minutes. Again, we should not be spending this much time on this division. Next week, I think we're gonna go back to the AFC. Jason, being that it's your big return here, what AFC division do you want to cover next? And it can't be the AFC East.
I mean, there's only one answer if we're going to actually do the best one. And I'm going to say AFC South because we're going to save the best for last.
That is, see, you weren't here, and that is correct because we discussed it last week, and we are doing the AFC West last. So,
listen, I know how this goes. You got to string people along and wait. If you want to hear our takes on the best division in football, you have to wait till the last show.
That one could go an hour, and
we could do an hour on that one and only get halfway through.
Exactly. Yeah.
That'd just be Kansas City.
Exactly. So, all right, gentlemen, again, I want to thank you guys for joining us here. We're going to put a bow on this and get it out. Mike, I know you're in the background there stalking us. We want to thank you. Ooh, keep playing with those. We want to thank you for doing all the dirty stuff behind the scenes for us tonight. And we couldn't do this without you, brother. Thank you. To everybody else, have a great night.